Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pommy and Oz. We're doing another one-on-one with an opposition fan, and we've got one of my favourites. You've seen me go on his show quite a few times. I've got Big J from the Centre Bounce. How are you doing, Jay, mate?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, can't complain. Raring to learn about the mighty Kangaroos today. And 2022 was a massive overhaul for you guys, wasn't it? You had a new coach, very active in the trade period. Now, how did you see 2022 as a whole? Like, are you happy with the changes, first of all? And do you feel a little bit more positive? There seems to be a positive feel down Arden Street at the moment.
Oh, mate, there's hope. I know people say, like, hope is the worst word ever, but there's hope and there's confidence that the team's actually moving forward, and it's fantastic to be a fan at the moment. We've kind of gone through 3 years of shit post Brad Scott. Even when Brad Scott was really there, like towards the end, was basically feeling the same as well. And it's Clarko's come in. There's obviously been changes in the trade period. Players have gone, players have come in, and there's just a new atmosphere as well. I won't attribute the changes so much to just Clarko coming in, but I'll say when Sonia Hood came in, she's the new president at the club. Everything started to change, and it's only changed for the better since then. So yeah, I think fans are generally pretty happy with what we're looking at, and it's not looking like we're going to be the dumpster of the AFL anymore. At least that's what we feel like internally at the moment. So pretty happy.
I think from the outside as well, I think there is a massive change in just the vibe. And last year was a weird year for you because you had them wins, do you know what I mean, in the middle part of the year, particularly against Richmond. And you were one of them teams as well that nearly beat Collingwood. And Collingwood had to work overtime. But it felt like it was almost there in some games, didn't it? But then there was a massive skill gap. Like, you were one of them teams I remember as a Carlton fan thinking, I don't want to play them just because you don't know which North is going to turn up. If the good North turns up, you're in for a bad time. If the bad North turns up, it's going to be a good game.
Yeah. I wonder if being such a younger team, like having a lot of your key players being a lot younger, that's probably the gap in skills, but also just the gap in games that we were having. I think when we turned it on, when the players actually really wanted to play, then it was a good game. But there was times, even those ones you said were really close, where we were close for the first half of the game. We'd lose a couple of goals, and then the guys would just really fall off. You know, their confidence would fall, that kind of thing. And not having the leadership on field, but also from the coaching standpoint, to really kick them up the butt and say, hey, we're still in this. We can do it. Don't give up.
Yeah, I remember the Collingwood game was bizarre because there was like an inevitability, even going into the fourth quarter, that Collingwood would peg you back, even though the gap was so large. And it was kind of sad to watch in that last quarter because, like you say, felt like the entire steam and belief was just sucked out of North. And that first half, you guys were taking them on and making Collingwood look average at times. Then the second half, it was like a different team had come out and played for you guys.
Yeah. Well, it was even similar to our game, I think, this year when we played West Coast and they had all the COVID-ins. And it was just like we dominated the first half. It was fantastic. And then we only then ended up winning by about 2 goals because they just came back and we just let them and the confidence starting to drop. And then it was just a case of, well, can we hold on for the next 5 minutes? Not like, can we dominate this VFL team? So...
It was a weird season, but I mean, obviously the good times for North started just before the trade period, and the big announcement, surprise to many, but probably the worst kept secret in the AFL. Clarkson returned to the club that he played for, and how did that feel? Because obviously, as a Carlton fan, we were linked with him when we were searching for a coach, and everyone built themselves up that we'd get Clarko. He's returned. He is perhaps the GOAT. He's definitely the modern era GOAT of coaching. How does that feel? And what did that bring to you?
You know, when Moses parted the Red Sea and then his people started to like walk through and they saw the promised land on the up, that's what it felt like a little bit. I'll go back to post Brad Shaw era, so post Brad Scott era. It really felt like we didn't have anyone at the helm. Things were kind of wishy-washy. I know that Brad Scott left, and I don't think there was really a plan after that, like coaching-wise. So we've kind of been in the dust, in the storm for the last 3 years, and just kind of having someone there that is proven as well, I think is a huge thing, because we've gone from a guy who, won Defensive Coach of the Year in Shaw to being the interim coach to somehow signing him for like 2 years. Like, that's not leadership experience. That's not senior experience that you can really have confidence in. At the time, we were happy, but, looking back, really, similar to David Noble, this guy's been a good administrator, but had never even coached a team, never coached anyone really at senior level. So we've got this person in now, obviously proven, obviously a big figurehead, and someone who the media won't bash either. You're not going to have Caro and Kane Corns talking shit about Clarko, which we've had to deal with for the last few years as well. So it feels really good.
And the good times kind of happened straight away, because I know that I made the joke in the draft period that I was about to use the phrase that hadn't been used in the AFL for nearly 2 decades, and that's North have nailed this. But I know the press got on your case a little bit with the trade period at first. Now, I disagree with the press. I thought you ripped GWS off, because I don't think in any way, shape or form were North taking Cadman with pick 1. So I think straight off the bat, GWS gave away 2 picks really for the luxury of taking him. I don't think you guys would have done. I think who you took would have been one of. But I thought your trade period, I really liked it. Now, I've looked at the AFL media and they voted you a 4 out of 10. I thought that was unfair. I thought getting rid of Jason Horne-Francis, knowing you were getting 2 quality players, and I stand by my comments in the draft, Wardlaw and Sheasel are 10 times the player that Jason Horne-Francis is combined. But I thought Lug and Darcy Tucker were really solid signings, and you didn't pay overs for them. I thought Lug was wanted, people forget, this time last year by most of the top 4. And I was surprised you guys snuck in without it. And I think Tucker is the perfect guy to help motivate your young midfield and protect them, which I thought was desperate last year from them. So what did you think of your trade period? Because I know the AFL were harsh on it. Did you enjoy your trade period, first of all?
For a team that's not really very active in the trade period, usually coming down to us not being able to offload players for trade picks, it was really good. I think the assistance package from the AFL could have been better. And looking at our results, it probably should have been a little bit better. But we did really well with what we got. Logan Tucker for basically free. They didn't cost us anything. And even just kind of guys like Shields, who we got picked up in the rookie draft, adding to that kind of leadership. Now, it could have been better if St Kilda came to the table and offloaded Hunter Clark to us. I know there were some real talks in the process for that happening, but obviously that didn't happen. Fans, we're really happy with pick 2 and 3. Going back to what you're saying about Cadman, I think the draft board probably had him, Sheasel and Wardlaw as the first 3. Comben coming through, the club's put a lot of faith into him, and I think we're going to see that in 2023. So key forward wasn't as pressing need, I guess, as what external people think. But if you've got 3 options and now have a chance to get 2 of those 3, you give up one of them, right? Like 66% of my draft board, who I thought were the top 3, are now at my club. You got to be pretty happy with that as a list manager.
Mate, I thought you nailed it. And I always think Jason Horne-Francis was a mistake from the off. Like, there was rumours of him going for Port. I remember covering the draft last year and saying, I really don't like this for North. Like, I know they were kind of forced to. It was the logical pick. But I remember thinking at the time, I hope these guys trade back and, give it up now. But I actually think for the mistake you made, what you got back, I think in 10 years' time, Sheasel and Wardlaw are going to be a huge dub. And I would even chance Wardlaw's career will be more successful than Jensen Hoss-Francis. So the way I look at it is technically you didn't lose or you didn't win. You've got Wardlaw, brilliant, and Sheasel's just the icing on the cake.
Yeah, and the way I kind of look at it as well, like last year, Dacos and Horne-Francis were the clear top two. They had Callaghan who went to GWS, but he wasn't really pushing as much as those two were. So if you were first pick, you kind of had to take the second player. And that's obviously what we did. Looking back on it, people were saying, hey, we should have taken like Richmond's offer, a bunch of first round picks and then some picks next year, which would have been this year's picks, similar to Adelaide as well. But then we wouldn't have got the assistance package and we probably wouldn't have got Logan Tucker over the line. So in hindsight, Horne-Francis has left. We've now got like a first round pick this year. We've got Port's first round pick next year, which I think a lot of people don't take into effect as much. And we've brought in Logan Tucker as well. So for Horne-Francis leaving, it's not bad. I mean, it's been a year of hell of poor performance on field, but North Melbourne's used to that. So,
well, I really like the Griffin Logue pick as well. And I was watching, just doing the research for this video, Mr. Clarkson introduced his squad number, and he mentioned a famous ex-Hawks player that he saw, and that did excite me from your point of view, because I've listened to a lot of ex-Hawks interviews from Hawthorn players, and they talk about the genius of Clarkson in the terms of talent acquisition and understanding their future roles before they do. And he gives me that little inclination that I think Logue, who was this time last year, like we say, highly touted in a trade and a lot of Victorian clubs looking at him, kind of went quiet this year. I could see Logue being a real gun and a player that probably will match up with Mackay really well.
Yeah. Are you talking about ex-Hawks player Sam Gibson?
Yeah.
But you know what club he came from before Hawthorn, right?
Yeah, you guys.
Yeah. So kind of overall end of circle, coming back to life kind of thing. Logue's a really interesting pick because I think we were kind of gifted almost the pick of the draft or the player of the trade period, just because Freo's backline is so stacked. And this guy's a phenomenal talent. It's so stacked that they had to play him in the forward line to get him on field. Like that, he did have some rotation in the back line, but even just to get him on field, they had to play him forward a lot. And he wasn't happy with that from all accounts. He wanted to play back line. He's a defender. And yeah, we just made the offer and then he came across, really.
Yeah, I think Ben Mackay and Griffin together, I look at that and I think that's a solid spine. That is a youngish spine as well. It's a spine that, with the forwards, you've mentioned Comden, you've got Larky. I actually look at North, and I know the results will counter it, but I don't think the list is as bad as the results have been. I think if I was Clarkson, you kind of want to get your teeth into that. There's some very talented players, and I think you've seen Davis Unanaki as well, a guy that 2 years ago people were saying was probably in the Dow conversation as disappointing pick. He's really risen in the last couple of years. All them players I'm excited about seeing. If Clarkson can unlock 10%, you've got quite a fearsome 5 or 6 players already who are very young.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at our trade period and, well, in previous years, and it's not like we haven't brought in any huge names, but we've brought in talent from other clubs. So guys like Stevenson, guys like even CCJ, who I'm seeing a little bit of in the preseason now, looking really good. That the talent on the list isn't terrible. It's just the poor coaching that's really, and the atmosphere around the club and the feeling of dread, I guess, that's really kept a lot of those players down. And, as we spoke about in the start of the interview, just being like, we've had games where we've dominated and it looks good. And Clarko being able to bring a lot more of that out and stopping the negative side is really going to help. So him coming in has been fantastic, but it's not like he's had to build the team from the ground up because the talent's definitely there. The foundation's there. It's just cycling out a few of these players who, as you would know, being a Carlton fan, sometimes your club brings in fringe maybe players, right? So cycling out a few more of those and keeping the guys who really want to be there. I don't know if you saw the Clarko interview, probably. I think it was like his first address to the players and saying something like, you're all playing for the club now, but the club wants premiership players. And sorry, but some of you guys may have to go to make that happen. You're an AFL player. Sure, this guy can play, but is he someone who's going to be able to take us to a premiership? Because that's why I'm here. So I think that's the attitude kind of going forward. And we've seen that with a few of the players who we've delisted. And as other players' contracts come up, I think that's going to be the same as well.
I can see this rebuild not taking so long. And you talked about premiership players. I looked at your draft, and we'll move on to the draft. The draft for me, I don't think anyone in the league can say North didn't win the draft. I think every pick North had, even when we get to the rookie picks, I think North have absolutely A-graded it out of the park. And obviously you took Sheezel and you took Wardlaw with your first two picks.
Yep.
Sheezel for me is an excitement machine and someone that I'd be very excited if I was a shin boner. I think Sheezel wasn't talked about enough. I think in how exciting, we know how good Wardlaw is as the bull and that inside guy, but Sheezel for me is that premiership player. I can see him being a guy who kicks goals in the grand final.
Yeah, he's fantastic. It's not even so much what he lacks in speed, he makes up with game IQ and being able to put himself in the right positions. Similar to a Paul Curtis, where if he's not kicking a goal, he's in the position to set up one of his teammates or take that kind of bit of pressure off other people so they can be ready. Really, really, you look at his highlights and he's so unselfish with the way that he plays as well. Like, hey, 50-50 chance I could be there to kick the goal and take the glory. But no, I'm going to take the 90% chance, pass to my teammates, and we score as a team. So that kind of attitude is huge in the AFL.
I think working with Cam Zerha as well, I think that when you've got such a creative forward line like you have, I really rate Zerha and Larkey. And obviously, as a Carlton fan, we have previous with Larkey. He seems to have his best games against Carlton. But yeah. I can see Sheezel doing them little things as well and bringing them a bit more into the game. And he's a very creative player. And Wardlaw, for me, is superior to Jason Horne-Francis at what he does. And even though he's been out for large parts, I've watched him closely. I think he's superior. And I think the fact he's Victorian as well means that there's no distractions for him. He is home technically. I think you've got a decade player there. And I can see someone who's going to really relish, knowing Clarkson's history of inside midfielders, I think he's going to have a great time down Arden Street. Yeah.
And we offloaded Horne-Francis and got Wardlaw and a first-round pick. So you can't really complain about that. I think so as well. Looking at the highlights has been fantastic. Obviously, he's had those hamstring issues a little bit coming into the draft. And I know they're slowing him into preseason training. Probably post-Christmas, it's going to be a bit different. But at the moment, he hasn't got as involved as other players in the club have. But that's okay, right? He's a first-year player in the AFL. I think the benefit of North's midfield, I don't know if you see it as like being a Carlton fan, but our midfield is somewhat stacked. So we've got your Phillips, you've got your Powell, LDU, Simpkin, Goldie obviously takes a spot. You've got Cunnington and a few others that there's not the requirement for him to play round one. He can develop a little bit in the VFL, get his body right and be that dominant figure when he comes in. Sometimes with those early first round picks, you feel like there's that pressure, you know what I mean? That, hey, we've taken him, we're a struggling side, he has to play. At North, I don't think that's there at the moment, which is fantastic for his situation.
I also think as well that North, and I mean this with all the due respect, I think teams like Carlton, Essendon, Richmond and stuff, when we're going through rebuilds and doing stuff, the press want immediate answers. Yeah. I do think North get a less exposure from the media. Obviously, Clarkson being there, I imagine it'll increase the eyes on them. But I do think, like you say, I look at your list and I think you've got a lot of depth in the right places. And I don't think anyone's expecting you not to finish 18th this year in the press. I think the press, if you finished 18th, wouldn't be shocked. So for me, I'm with you. There's no need to throw Wardlaw in round one to prove a point. And I don't think North will be bottom, just quietly. I don't see you winning the Spoon, but I just think there is no risk with Wardlaw. If you play him at the bye in seniors, you play him at the bye. I don't think there is a need for, we need points on the board round one. I think he can be cozied into the role.
Yeah. Do you think that's a fan-driven thing as well? Like, I know from people who are Essendon fans who are kind of like, we've had, 20 years of shit. Now we've got this new coach. We've got early draft picks. We want to start doing well. Do you feel like that's kind of a fan-driven thing as much as a media-driven thing at Carlton and Essendon?
100%. I was listening to Essendon fans when Scott said that we're a young list and we've got some talented youngsters and we've got to focus on blooding them. And I was reading some of the comments and people going, oh, God, excuses are starting. And I was thinking, as a Carlton fan, Essendon are rubbish. Like, let's be honest, they're rubbish. The senior players are rubbish. Look where they were last year. They got lucky the year before. Kind of let Brad Scott do what he needs to do and blood these youngsters. You need to go another way. And I agree. It's easy being the outside looking in. I think 2018, I was probably one of the Carlton fans who were like, play Dow now, play O'Brien now, just get us wins somewhere. But I think the mature thing is, and I think it's proven, the best players, you look at Fremantle, what they did with Chera, and we always have this argument, Chera versus Dow. The fact they could cozy him off halfback for a year before bringing him onto the ball, I think that's probably the reason Adam Chera is better than Dow, because he didn't have to go in the guts round one. He didn't have to get 30 touches. He got to learn the game. And you look at Dacos at Collingwood, cozied him off halfback, pinch hit him in the midfield. I don't think Dacos would have been as good if they'd thrown him on the ball round one and said, right, get knocked out. Do you know what I mean? And try and be a junior again.
And you know what the crazy thing is? LDU is even better than both of them. And better than, I would go as far as to say LDU is better than Andy Brayshaw from Freo, kind of where his development is at this point in time. We're talking guys from the 2017 draft, right? LDU is almost better than that now. And he's lost basically a year and a half from his development due to injuries. So give him that little bit of time. He's catching right back up in a team that's going to be doing well, that we won't be finishing last on the ladder. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen.
No, I agree with you. And I think with LDU as well, the big thing is the development of his body. Like this year, he looks like a thug. Do you know what I mean? He suddenly could bully people around. And I think that's the big thing with LDU. He got that confidence in his body. You saw it, particularly in the halfway point. He wasn't worried his body was going to let him down. He started to fly into people and muscle and bully and stifle. And I think that's exciting because I think North are always known as that team, aren't they? I think a good North side is a dirty side, a side that's up for a fight, that isn't going to fold. And I think LDU is that modern day Cunnington type player as well for you guys, that he's going to drive the standard and he's going to fly the flag for the Roos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people talk about the shinboner spirit, right? The never give up spirit. And that's kind of where it comes from. Speaking on LDU specifically, he had, he was out for half a year with OP. He was out for a period of time as well with other injuries at the start of his career in the AFL. So, growing into your body now is probably the right thing for him. He is going to command that midfield in the next couple of years, and people are going to be giving him the ball just because of how dominant he's going to be.
Mate, I'm looking forward to it. And another draftee you guys got who I was shocked no one bit on earlier. And for me, Sheasel was probably the best guaranteed forward. I think the most damaging forward in this draft. And I had the privilege of interviewing him, Brayden George. You got him. We probably won't see him this year. But this guy is an animal, like an absolute animal. Like, in my opinion, I was shocked no one even took him in the top 15. I thought he's worth the risk, particularly if you're a good side with decent players. He's worth leaving in the reserves for a year to get right. Brayden George, how do you feel about that? Because I looked at your list at the end of this draft and thought, Sheasel and George, Larky, Zerha, that has a premiership ring to it. That has, on paper, 5 years' time, that is destructive.
Well, we've put him on the inactive list now due to his recovery from the ACL, so we won't see him this year anyway. But looking at kind of the draft comparisons, right? Wardlaw was kind of seen a little bit as like what Oliver does around the midfield, that kind of thing. You know who George was comparisoned as?
Who did they compare Braden to?
Petrarca.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, if we've come in and picked up Oliver and Petrarca in the same draft, I'm pretty happy. Looks like that real power forward who can play in the midfield. And I don't think the injury concerns worry us too much. So similar to what we were talking about, Wardlaw not being demanding playing straight away, we can give George that, a year in the gym, that time to get his body right, because there's not that demand for him to play straight away. And then similar to Phillips coming in this year off injury, next year we're going to have almost 3 first-round picks playing. George plus whoever we take with ours and Port's pick. So kind of that immediate injection of talent back into the team. It's going to be really good. I don't think a lot of fans saw much of him just because of those injuries, throughout the draft profiles, that kind of thing. And obviously content like yours really helped. But just getting this guy in is fantastic. And he loves the club, and his family's so happy that he's staying in Victoria.
Yeah, and honestly, interviewing him, he's such a nice kid, such a nice boy. And there was a real fire. That was something that was evident when I interviewed him, the fire to do it and the disappointment. And he talks, I advise any North fan to go back. He talks very openly and candidly about the injury. And that instantly put me at ease as well, because he was literally straight in the mindset of how do I get right? 1, 2, what do I need to do to make sure it never happens again? There was a real awareness and a fear that bought that awareness, that he realized how quickly his future can be taken away from him if he doesn't look after himself. So I love that pick. And then we brought a son of an icon to your club, and Cooper Harvey, another Harvey, enters the system, Brent's son. And I was shocked this guy fell so late. I was doing the watch along, and I was thinking, surely when we got into the late 40s, someone has a sniff. But no one did. And he arrives, and that must excite you, because his back end, particularly in the juniors, probably was in the conversation of top 25, 30.
Yeah. I guess it's similar to if you look at the Davey brothers from Essendon, right? Where these players who are kind of locked in, they're going to be selected by their clubs. It just depends where they land. Didn't get bid on as well. So both of them, I think, were almost picks in the 50s. Similar to Cooper Harvey, where after our third pick, which was George, obviously, we had the points to cover it. So clubs wouldn't even bother to bid on him. So watching Cooper, Cooper actually did a little bit of preseason training with us in January 2022. Looking at him then, how his body was, he was very mature for the age. And now it even looks like that as well. So he could almost be what you would compare like a second or third year player in body development to what he is now, being a first year player. I don't know about you, but I'd almost say that, is it fair saying that sons of former players almost looked more developed and more ready in the AFL when they get picked up than like someone who's come out of the 18s system? Is that kind of fair to say?
I'd say when I look at Jack Silvani as a comparison, I think although body-wise he may have not been bigger than them, I think he's nous. I think just having that in your blood, and I think that speaks volumes. Having a dad, obviously, as we know, he was a manic trainer, wasn't he? Yeah. Brent in his days. And look at him now. He probably could still play elite level football. The guy's hench. I'd imagine that rubs off on his son, the fact that he looks like he's always eaten right. He looks like he's always trained right. I'd imagine the apple doesn't fall from the tree. And you've only got to look at Cooper's last 6 weeks, particularly the televised games. His intelligence was another level. You could see this guy wasn't just off the street. He lived and breathed this game. And I agree with you. His body-wise, he did look like a first, second-year AFL player as an 18-year-old. So it scares me to think another year in the system, what he could look like 2023, 2024.
Yeah, I think going back to last year, Jackson Archer, who we picked up as well, was a similar kind of position. You know, dad being in the AFL, you know, stellar career, premiership player, that kind of thing. If you look at Cooper Harvey, though, from birth, you're groomed to, you're going to be playing for my AFL club. Your whole career, your whole mindset, your dad pushing you every weekend to do the right thing. You know, none of those days where, he probably had cheat meals and whatever, but those times when it's like, you know, I don't think his dad would let him get fat, you know, that kind of mindset of being that workhorse type player. Because you look at Brett now, he's still really fit, like you say. He was our runner for the last couple of years. I don't think he's doing that this year, but just that kind of ultra trainer type of mindset who isn't afraid of putting in the hard work. We've got something special, and for him to fall, I know people talk about Dacos and how the father-son and Ashcroft this year, how the father-son's kind of rigged and everything. I wonder if Cooper Harvey, because he broke his arm a couple of times and had some injuries throughout his, under 18 season. If he didn't have that, if he was able to play a full time, would he be in a similar comparison to kind of those players? But now we've basically picked him up for free with a pick in the 50s. So, wait and see what happens.
I think he's I think also being in 50s, being the son, comes that pressure, doesn't it? Comes a lot of pressure. There'll be a lot of people out there who see the Harvey name, and it happened with Silvani. People instantly assume you've got their dad in a time warp.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's up to Cooper. Not saying Cooper won't reach them heights. He could do. He could well do. It's all up to him. He's got the talent. But I think being at that pick comes with a little bit of less pressure. Like Dacos went pick early. He was probably the pick one, if we're honest. I think there's always that pressure with him because there's no way to hide that pressure. Even if you're called Cooper Dave and you go pick one, people expect you to be pretty good. But in the 50s, there's that margin for error that we're not expecting to see him play round one, not expecting him to win the Rising Star year one. There's that little bit of leniency for him just to go and do his own thing and hone his game.
Yeah, a bit of a surprise packet too. So when people see him, they're gonna be happy.
And then I thought, and this one shocked me, I couldn't believe Blake Drury got to the rookie draft. A lot of the Victorian boys that we spoke to on this channel mentioned Blake by name, particularly for his work ethic. And his ability to learn was a big pick out from a lot of the boys of how hard he works and crafts on his game. And you got the purest small forward here with your first pick. And this guy here has got a high engine and a high footy IQ. And one here that I wouldn't be surprised to see embarrass some of the guys that went a lot earlier in the draft, because everyone I've spoken to about this kid was shocked he didn't go in the top 40.
Yeah, from what I've been told and what I've kind of heard, that he was actually penciled in for our first rookie spot this year if he did make it through the national draft, which is what he did. It's surprising as well, like you're saying, guys like Charlie Clark, who may have been on paper a little bit better, going so early in the draft and then him falling to the rookies. But, the rookie draft has really had some quality small forward talent make it in there and do really well in the AFL. So this kid's already impressing in the preseason, coming and watching when I've watched and seeing from the track watches. And I would not be surprised if he pushes for a senior spot this year in the best 22.
He's definitely one to watch for the shin boners. And you also went out, and I really like this pick, Hamish Free. So we did talk about him late on this channel as one of the mature age guys. He made his seniors this year in Waffle. We know Waffle is a tough physical league, and this guy's a giant as well. Yeah. He is a big boy, 202, 103, and obviously in that mid-20s, so it's not like he's a baby. He's done the development in the State League. This one here is a free hit, I think, and obviously Goldie's not going to be around forever. I do believe Goldie doesn't age because he seems to never age. He's looked 35 since he was 17 as Goldie, but a great person for him to learn off in his rookie year, isn't it? Goldstein, who maximized his potential throughout his career.
Yeah, I think with the last 3 picks in our rookie draft, we've really kind of focused a little bit around developing the VFL team, because that's been a huge struggle with us, is that I always say to people when I talk to them, AFL teams have phenomenal VFL teams because there's the pressure, the structure there, the pressure for spots, the structure of, hey, this is what the senior side's doing. This is what we're going to do in the VFL with our players, and being able to mirror, say, if someone has an injury coming straight in, and Free kind of does that for us. Yes, he did, average 41 disposals, 41 hit outs in the waffle, which is fantastic. He's a monster of the man, Conley. They should have called him Hamish Tree instead of Hamish Free, because his shoulders are like out here. He just walks around. I reckon he'd have to almost turn sideways to get through small doors. That's how big this guy is.
He's a big guy.
In our AFL team, I think this year we're going to be playing 2 rucks, kind of similar to everyone else. And the VFL ruckman, who we'd always have to fill in the VFL side, probably wasn't up to standard. So to be able to have one of either Cherry, Comben playing in the VFL team alongside Free really creates that structure between the two teams, saying, hey, if you're going to be ruck forward in the VFL team, you're going to do that the same in the AFL team. And, if you're going to play main ruck in the AFL team, there's someone to mirror you in the VFL team. So kind of having that extra player. I think as well, Cherry and CCJ may have not locked in that Goldie replacement spot. So having someone else to come in and create competition is really important too, which is what's happened now.
No, I mean, I love it. And I agree with you. I think the VFL is so important in today's AFL, particularly something that we talk about at Carlton, the fact that our VFL team now mirrors the seniors, where when it was the Bullants, and if you ever went to go and watch a Bullants game when Carlton owned them, it was like watching 2 different teams. You would not even know they were affiliated, apart from the fact some Carlton players played for them. It was total different style of football. The fact it's mirrored, you can clearly identify who's playing what role in the seniors. I think I'm agree with you, and that leads us on to Danny Howe. I thought Danny Howe was a great get for you guys. I think he's good enough to play AFL football still, 96 games. But also, I think it's so important to protect them younger bodies and have that guy. And this is a guy that, let's be honest, Carlton fans know him as the guy who broke Fisher's leg and hit Cripps cheekily and got the 2-game ban. But he's a little bit of a ruthless guy. He's not scared of these players, and he does protect his own team. And I don't mind Howe. I thought Howe was a very safe pick, right age bracket, but also allows you that stopgap between playing Wardlaw tomorrow and having someone there to make sure he's looking after the kids. I think Howe's a great little acquisition for North.
Yeah, and coming off, basically, I think it's a year from actually playing senior footy. He's still really fit. He hasn't lost a lot of that. He's probably put on a little bit of muscle, which is fantastic. And kind of going back to what you're saying about how protecting the younger kids, you'd assume Clarko would kind of know that that's the type of player he is from playing under Clarko, and he's kind of sought him out and said, hey, I need you to do this role at this club. You might not play seniors every week, but there's a spot for you. This is the position that we're looking for. And heck, if our midfield is smashed by injuries, you might get a few games too. So just to wait and see what happens. But I'm happy with it too. With basically like a free, because remember, part of the assistance package was 2 extra rookie picks as well. So for basically free, like outside of our list, he's a pretty good player.
And I know from Carlton, when we have injuries, sometimes players have to play earlier. You'd much rather have Howe coming in round 2 due to an injury than rushing Wardlaw and maybe ruining any momentum he's built in training by having to play the senior bodies. Howe's one of them players that, like, I agree, I think he'll up the training standard as well, because we know Daniel Howe is the definition of average, I would say, which if the kids need to make AFL level, they have to surpass him in training. And I always think them benchmark players are so important in training. Like, people knock the average AFL player, but I think for someone like Wardlaw, he's got to be thinking in his mind, I've got to get better than this guy first before we start talking about me being a top level player.
Yeah, definitely. If he's the gatekeeper for our kids to play AFL, I'm happy with that.
And obviously, like we say, the trade period, draft period, I thought you guys nailed, and I think you're in a real good place. How does that translate, Jay, in your expectations for 2023? What are you expecting to see from the Roos?
It's interesting because, you have this side of the media that's saying, hey, you guys are still going to be bottom of the ladder, wooden spooners again. That's our predictions. You've got people on Facebook and Twitter saying the same things as well when they do their ladder comparisons. But I just don't think it's going to happen this year. I think our players are good enough to compete. Maybe not with the top 4 teams to win every week, but our players are good enough that once we actually get some form of actual coaching into the side, things are going to be a lot different. And I really feel like it's going to change in 2023. I think we're going to come out, maybe not bust the gates open from round 1, even though we are playing West Coast, which you'd think might be, it's a pretty fair game for us to win. That we're going to surprise a lot of people. And they're going to be like, holy shit, like, hey, where did this team come from? Why have they not performed like this for the past 3 years? And it's like, we haven't had a coach. We haven't had someone stable for that long. We haven't had standards. You talk about training standards now and you watch the preseason interviews and, guys are like, oh, we just weren't fit enough. It's like, yeah, of course not. You're jogging on field in the 4th quarter. Like, you're not fit enough. But a lot of that is changing now. And you can see that from just the attitudes of the players and the people around the club and the things that Clarko and Hutt and other people have really brought into the team. And just the attitudes of everybody that, things are a lot different. And I'm not expecting top 8, but if we're competitive, I'll be pretty happy.
I think that's fair. And I think it's unfair of the media to say that you're bottom. I think there's, I really do in my heart of hearts. I just think the Eagles are cooked and I don't think they've addressed it. I sense a little bit of arrogance in the terms of where the Eagles are as well. I think they've really underestimated, in my opinion, where they are as a football club. And I looked at their trade and draft period and I kind of was like, oh,
yeah,
you've stagnated, where I think North, as we've established from this video, you are progressively better. But there is an argument for you not to do well, because I do think there's a bit of symmetry. And I always say there's symmetry in football, in sport, that Clarkson had a very famous #1 pick in Luke Hodge that he built his entire dynasty on almost. And there is a guy coming through the draft this year. I want to briefly touch on Harley Reid, who a marauding halfback, tough tackling interceptor who's a beast on the ball. Very similar to young Luke Hodge in his junior years. Have you got an eye already on someone like that? And I'm not suggesting North would tank, but surely you would be happy to finish bottom if it meant you got that guy as well.
Hey, we don't have to tank this year. We just have to make Port tank. If Port tank and we do well, I'm happy with that too, because we've got their 1st round pick. I know Hawthorn are probably looking for him as well. Some of their off-season changes, I guess is the right word, with losing Tom Mitchell and stuff's going to push them down the ladder a little bit. People have looked at Reid quite a lot. I think they've looked at, is it Moya? M-I-O-R as well, as kind of being a player who might be available at our 1st round pick as well. So if we don't get Reid, someone like him who's comparable. But I think the club in itself is just ready for success. So similar to other sides, I think if we do well on field, I don't think the draft pick is as valuable. I think the talent's in the team with a couple more years of development, heck, even just this off-season, you're going to see stuff, improving quite a lot. So we don't have to tank for that 1st round pick anymore. That's almost like what we've done to get Sheasel and Wardlaw in now.
No, I think that's fair. And I think one thing I'm expecting from North this year is they're not going to take a backward step with Clarko there. They're not going to be a pushover. They are going to make all sides work. And I think at the end of the day, if you guys can get away with 4 to 6 wins and not finish bottom and be in that 16, 15, 14 position, but knowing you've built something and there's a start, I think that's a win for North, really, getting in that position, because that opens the door as well to attracting talent in as well. When players can see something's been built, they're more likely to say, well, you know what, great coach, building list, I'll jump ship and come and join the Shinboners.
Yeah, and we've already got a quality talent in Griffin Logue trying to come in. Hunter Clark almost happened as well. So, that's with us being bottom of the ladder with a new coach. So give us, I don't think 4 to 6 is fair. I would almost say I'm going to push for a little bit more, go from like 6 to 8 wins. So kind of around that 13, 14 point of the ladder. I think we could do it just with like a game plan, basically. So like you say, once the team starts to get better, then things going to look up. I mean, heck, Brisbane were like bottom of 3 of the ladder for 3 years in a row and somehow landed Lockie Neal. So if we can have a somewhat good year, I think some talent's probably going to say, hey, I want to jump ship. I was a Hawthorn fan as a kid. I love me some Clarko. You guys are doing well. Let's see what we can do with this team. So wait and see what happens.
Mate, I love it. And I wish you, from the bottom of my heart, all the best of luck. I know what it's like to be at the bottom of the ladder. I'm a Carlton fan, and it ain't a fun place. It looks like a fun place when we're talking draft picks and stuff like that, but it isn't the greatest place to be a fan. Jay, where do we find you, my friend? The links are below us now, but where can the guys and girls go and find you?
So I have my own YouTube channel called The Centre Bounce. We do AFL, but mostly Supercoach content. So when that comes out, we're going to be smashing that in the preseason. You can also find me on Twitter at The Bounce Centre.
Mate, everyone in the chat, get on there, go and check him out. He's a lovely guy as well, Jay. Always up for a footy chat. And Jay, I wish you the best for the football team perspective, and I wish you the best for yourself in 2023. Thank you very much for joining me today, mate. And we'll do more content in 2023 together, I'm sure.
Sounds good, Pommy. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, mate.